What if I told you that a young man who learned to sew in his grandmother's living room in South Africa beat 1700 designers from around the world to win fashion's biggest prize? What if I told you he's now dressing Beyoncé, showing at Paris Fashion Week, and forcing the fashion world to respect African creativity? This is the story of Thebe Magugu, and what you're about to hear will change how you see African fashion forever. Thebe Magugu was born on December 10, 1993, in Kimberley, South Africa. He grew up in the post-apartheid era, but South Africa was still dealing with the legacy of racial segregation and inequality. Thebe's family was working class. His mother was a teacher, his father worked in civil service. They lived modestly, but with dignity in a black township. From a young age, Thebe was different. He wasn't interested in sports like other boys. He was interested in clothes, colors, patterns, and stories. His grandmother noticed. She was a traditional Zulu woman who practiced beadwork and sewing. She would sit for hours creating beautiful beaded pieces that told stories of their culture. Young Thebe would sit beside her, mesmerized. He would ask, "Gogo, why do you use these colors? What does this pattern mean?" His grandmother would explain, "In Zulu culture, colors and patterns have meaning. They tell stories. They communicate identity, status, and history." Those lessons planted a seed in young Thebe's mind. Clothing is not just fabric, it's storytelling. As a teenager, Thebe started experimenting with fashion. He would take his mother's old clothes and remake them. He would go to second-hand shops, buy cheap clothes, and transform them into something new. His friends thought it was strange. They said, "Thebe, why do you care so much about clothes? That's for girls." But Thebe didn't care. He knew he had found his passion. After finishing high school, Thebe wanted to study fashion design, but there was a problem. Fashion schools in South Africa were expensive. His family couldn't afford the tuition at prestigious private fashion institutions. Thebe applied to the University of Johannesburg's fashion program. It was more affordable and still respected. He got accepted. At university, Thebe stood out. While other students copied European designers, Thebe looked to Africa for inspiration. He studied traditional African textiles. He researched the history of African fashion. He interviewed his grandmother and other elders about cultural clothing. His professors didn't always understand his vision. One professor said, "Thebe, if you want to succeed in fashion, you need to look to Paris, Milan, New York, not to African villages." But Thebe disagreed. He thought, why should African designers always copy Europe? Why can't we tell our own stories in our own way? In his final year, Thebe created a graduate collection inspired by South African women who had fought against apartheid. Each garment told a story of resistance, strength, and resilience. The collection was powerful, it was political, it was unapologetically African. When Thebe graduated in 2015, he faced a difficult reality. The South African fashion industry was small. Jobs were scarce. Most successful South African designers had to move to Europe or America to make it. Thebe didn't want to leave South Africa. He wanted to build his brand at home. But it was incredibly difficult. He started his label, Thebe Magugu, from his bedroom. He had no factory, no team, no investors. Just himself, a sewing machine, and a vision. Thebe would design clothes during the day and sew them at night. He would photograph the pieces himself. He would post them on Instagram, hoping someone would notice. For 2 years, Thebe struggled. He could barely afford fabric. He borrowed money from his mother. He worked other jobs to survive. Local South African fashion buyers didn't take him seriously. They said, "Your designs are too African." South African customers want European brands. International buyers said, "You're talented, but you're unknown. We can't take a risk on you." Thebe felt stuck. He was good enough, but not connected enough. He had talent, but no platform. Then in 2018, Thebe heard about the LVMH Prize. LVMH is the world's largest luxury goods company, owning brands like Louis Vuitton, Dior, Givenchy, and Fendi. Every year, they held a competition to discover and support young fashion designers from around the world. The prize included 300,000 euros and a year of mentorship from LVMH executives. It was the most prestigious prize in fashion. Over 1,700 designers from all over the world applied. Thebe decided to apply. He thought, "I have nothing to lose." He submitted his collection. Weeks passed. He heard nothing. He thought he had been rejected. Then one day he received an email. He had been shortlisted. Out of 1,700 applicants, he was one of 8 finalists. Thebe couldn't believe it. He was going to Paris to present his work to the biggest names in fashion. But there was a problem. Thebe had no money to fly to Paris. He had no money to produce the samples he needed to show. He had no team to help him. Thebe's mother stepped in. She took a loan to help him. Friends donated money. The South African fashion community rallied around him. In June 2019, Thebe flew to Paris. It was his first time in Europe. He was nervous, intimidated. The other finalists were from established fashion schools in London, New York, and Paris. They had big teams and investors. Thebe had only himself and his suitcase full of clothes he had sewn by hand. On the day of the presentation, Thebe stood in front of a panel of judges. The panel included Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH and one of the richest men in the world. It included artistic directors from Dior, Louis Vuitton, and other luxury brands. Thebe presented his collection. He talked about South African history. He talked about his grandmother's beadwork. He talked about using fashion to tell African stories. The judges listened intently. They looked at his garments. They felt the fabrics. They asked questions. Then came the announcement. On June 5, 2019, Thebe Magugu was announced as the winner of the LVMH Prize. He had beaten 1,700 designers from around the world. A young man from a South African township who learned to sew from his grandmother had won fashion's biggest prize.
Thebe stood on stage in shock. Tears rolled down his face. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about his mother who took out a loan. He thought about everyone who told him African fashion would never be respected. Back in South Africa, people celebrated in the streets. News channels covered the story. The president of South Africa congratulated him. Thebe Magugu had put African fashion on the global map. Winning the LVMH Prize changed everything. Suddenly, international fashion buyers wanted to stock his brand. Magazines wanted to interview him. Celebrities wanted to wear his clothes. Beyoncé wore his designs. Naomi Campbell walked in his shows. His clothes appeared in Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Thebe started showing his collections at Paris Fashion Week. His runway shows became must-see events. Fashion critics praised his ability to blend African heritage with contemporary high fashion.
But Thebe never forgot his mission. He continued to base his brand in South Africa. He employed local South African artisans and seamstresses. He told African stories through every collection. He created collections about South African liberation fighters. He made pieces inspired by traditional African currency systems. He collaborated with African artists and photographers. Thebe also became a voice for African fashion. He spoke at conferences about the need for the fashion industry to respect and invest in African creativity. He said, "For too long, African fashion has been seen as exotic or ethnic. But we are not exotic, we are sophisticated, we are innovative, we belong on the same stage as Paris, Milan, and New York." Today, Thebe Magugu is one of the most respected young designers in the world. His brand is sold in luxury stores across Europe, America, Asia, and Africa. He has collaborated with major brands. He has won multiple awards. He has been featured in major museums and exhibitions. But more importantly, Thebe has opened doors. Young African designers now see that it's possible. You don't have to move to Europe. You don't have to abandon your African identity. You can succeed by being proudly African. Thebe Magugu's story teaches us powerful lessons. First, your heritage is not a limitation. It's your unique advantage. Thebe's African stories set him apart. Second, rejection from traditional paths can lead to revolutionary success. Not getting into elite schools forced Thebe to be original. Third, storytelling matters in every industry. Thebe uses fashion to tell African stories. Fourth, stay rooted while reaching global. Thebe is based in South Africa but recognized worldwide. Fifth, representation changes industries. Thebe's success is forcing fashion to respect African creativity. From learning to sew with his grandmother in a South African township to winning the LVMH Prize and showing at Paris Fashion Week. From being told African fashion isn't sophisticated enough to dressing Beyoncé and being celebrated by Vogue. Thebe Magugu proved that African creativity belongs on the world's biggest stages, that our stories are as valuable as any European narrative, and that the future of fashion is African. So, what did you learn from Thebe Magugu's story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible African success stories. Next week, we're bringing you the story of Davido, the Nigerian boy born into wealth who chose music over his family's fortune and became one of Africa's biggest superstars. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and remember, your culture, your heritage, your story. They are not things to hide or tone down. They are your superpower.